Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Draven.
And I'm Patrick Guerra.
I almost went with my old pro wrestling name, Damian Draven. That's actually
That's
my
right.
old pro wrestling. I named my pro
I almost
wrestling
went with
name
Top
after,
Dollar, but I'd be like, maybe the people listening to tonight's podcast might not get that reference.
Yeah, so we are a little late on reviewing The Crow because it opened the same week as a film that you and I just full on just filleted called Strange Darling. And we actually had three kind of thriller / horror movies open on the same day. And because we like to do a deep dive on one film per week, we tried to do multiple films on past episodes, just didn't go over well. Our fans were not happy. They're like, give us one film. We like the deep dive. So we did Strange Darling last week, so we are a week behind on The Crow. And judging by the initial box office returns, we may have been the only people to actually see this movie.
Yes, Damon. The Crow, with a budget of $50 million, only grossed $2 million at the box office. Pretty rough, but it does star Bill Skarsgård as Eric, FKA Twigs as Shelley, and Danny Houston as Vincent Rogue, written by Zach Balin and William Joseph Schneider, based on characters by James O'Barr, and directed by Rupert Sanders. Here we are, Damon, at the remake. We should be clear, the remake of The Crow, this reimagining, this whatever it is of The Crow.
And we have to be clear about this because I want to go back. If you go back and listen to our Crow episode, this is going back in May because that was the actual anniversary of The Crow, the 30th anniversary. It's been well documented. The Crow is one of my favorite films of all time. I'm a full-on obsessed fan of that film. I actually got to see it in theaters when I was a kid, and I've remained a massive fan of that film ever since. But I said on that podcast that I'm not precious about them doing a remake or a reboot or whatever you want to call this, because what people don't like to I understand the passion that Crow fans have because what happened, the tragedy that befell Brandon Lee. I do understand that. Of course, I've remained a massive Crow fan, not only because of the film, but that also plays a part in it. I'm sure it does. There's no way it doesn't. But what I made clear in that point was, even The Crow in 1994, when Alex Proyas adapted it, that was an adaptation. It was a comic book by James O'Barr. So it wasn't like it was his original story and Brandon Lee wrote it and everyone's just now bastardizing it all these years later. I think people forget there were like 5 really bad Crow sequels already out there. Some starring Edward, what was his name from Terminator?
Furlong,
Edward Furlong, back in the guy who never but that guy's career. Edward Furlong. I mean, there were a lot of really bad versions out there. So like people are acting like this is some kind of sacrilegious thing to do. It's already been done multiple times over. So I want to be clear about that. Like, I swear to God, if you go back and listen to that, I said, I'm going in with an open mind. And even when they released the first photo and everyone freaked out and they're like, oh my God, cancel this movie. It's the worst thing ever. And I said, calm down. We don't even know what it looks like yet. Like, I'm the biggest Crow fan in the universe. And even I'm like, slow down on this. So I went in with a clear head, and everyone's like, you're preambling here for a reason, Damon. Yes, I am. Because I went in with a clear mind, an open mind, Patrick. When I left, I think my worst nightmares were realized.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know because I haven't seen those sequels to The Crow, which I'm sure are pretty rough in their own right? They were just trying to cash in. I'll tell you the basic plot of this movie right now. This remake involves soulmates, Eric and Shelley, who are brutally murdered. Given the chance to save the love of his life, Eric must sacrifice himself and traverse the worlds of the living and the dead, seeking revenge. Damon, do I have that right? Does that feel like what the trailer tells us?
I mean, that's the story of The Crow. So I mean, you're not telling. It's a doomed couple, and one of them is brought back to life to avenge an unjust death. That is literally the premise of every Crow movie. So you're not spoiling anything by saying that, and that is at the core what The Crow 2024 is about.
Yeah, it's no different. And I was a first time viewer of The Crow back when we talked about it back in the springtime. Because I didn't watch the original for the longest time because of Brandon Lee's death. It just made me feel weird to watch that, and then I finally got over that, watched it, and I really enjoyed that movie. I'm not here tonight to compare these two movies. Damon's not here tonight to compare these two movies. It's silly to do that. These are very different things. The Crow from the 90s, starring Brandon Lee, and this movie, they don't even attempt to be the same kind of movie. So cool your jets, everybody. And this is really important to me because you and I both traverse TikTok and social media for horror creators who are great at recommending movies that we don't know about. It's actually a wonderful thing that these creators are out there like telling me they have the time to watch these movies. I don't have the time to watch, and they go, "This one's fucking rad, and that one's not." I really enjoy that. What I don't enjoy, and not all the creators do this, just some get like physically angry when a movie is bad or they don't like it or anything like that. Like I'm getting old, Damon, but I ain't got time for that shit no more. I don't have time to let movies get me emotionally riled up anymore. It's just there's no point. Alien Romulus, I could have hated that movie and I still would have come on here and go, here are the strengths and here are some of the weaknesses. That's how I feel about this movie. Even though I love that franchise, I'm serious about that franchise in a big way. I still wouldn't come on here and just spit vitriol. I'm going to spoil a little something for the folks out there. Damon and I didn't really care for this movie. We really didn't. It really didn't work for us. Not because it had anything to do with the 90s movie. We're not loaded up on that shit. That movie's that movie, this movie's this movie, and we're judging it on what it is. At the end of the day, we still want you to go decide for yourself. We're just going to give you our take here today. But it really made me think about something. I follow a lot of writers on Twitter, a lot of screenwriters and stuff. Often, and we've certainly done it on this podcast, and I've tried my best over the years to evolve in this podcast and learn how to be better at being critical of movies. One thing is like, yes, the director signs up to take the blame. That's honestly the reason the director gets to take that credit is because if it goes wrong, everybody just blames the director. And you and I have sometimes even criticized scripts, and sometimes we just go, the problem with this movie is the story. But then, being on writer Twitter, I read some kind of horror stories from certain writers, and there was one in particular. He gave this great bit of advice. It was really good. And then just some guy in the comments was like, "Yeah, but you wrote this one movie and it really sucks." And he went, "You know what, dude? I want to tell you something. You think I don't know that movie sucks? You think I don't know that, like, when I wrote that movie, it got to the studio, it got passed through 3 different directors, 2 different actors. This actor came in, changed this thing. I have no control over that. Then the studios changed hands, and all of a sudden this other studio has different ideas for it. Then they get on set, and then the locations are screwed, and then this actor drops out, and then this one has to change, and then this director and that studio executive have problems. And before you know it, the movie looks nothing like the movie I wrote. And I still put my heart and soul into that movie, and I got to put my name on that script that eventually went out there." It happens all the time. It happened for a movie that we talked about on this podcast. And the writer said, "Hey, I'd love to talk to you guys, but I don't really want to talk to you about that movie because that movie's nothing like the movie I wrote." I'm not telling you, I'm not spilling any tea or anything like that. I'm just letting everybody out there know that when you get really mad at a movie, and you get really mad at writers or mad at directors and you go, "You guys fucking ruined my childhood," or "You ruined my favorite movie." No, they didn't. In fact, they tried their damnedest to make a good film for you. They really did. A lot of elements come into play. A lot of elements. And only a few, very rare few, I'm talking under 5, maybe under 10 directors in the world get full control over a movie. That's it. 5 to 10, maybe. The rest have to go through a absolute maze of financiers, producers, studio executives, actors who insist on changes. And you don't get to say dick because you want to make a movie, you got to play the game. That's how it is. But you put your name on the writer or the director credit, and you got to take the hits. So I'm just asking everybody, even though tonight we're not going to talk about this movie in a great way, just remember that this process, this filmmaking process, it's a committee. It's a huge committee. It's millions of dollars that are being spent, and it changes movies. So all I'm asking you is you ain't got to like shit, because I'm telling you right now, Damon and I didn't like The Crow, but just cool that anger off. It's misplaced, and you don't need it anyway. Here's my hippie side of me, Damon. The anger only poisons you at the end of the day. It really does. Just Just be like, all right, that didn't work for me. I'm moving on. Damon,
I
let's
feel
move on.
I feel like this is a personal attack based on my opinion on Halloween Ends. I feel like you're really attacking me right now. That's just, uh,
Listen, sometimes you got to get angry to evolve. Sometimes anger is a real
uh,
emotion, right?
I will. I listen as a guy who writes for a living. I will both agree and disagree with that. I agree in the sense of it takes a lot to get a movie made, and a lot of times, and I don't know if the story you're referencing is the one that I know about, but I do know a personal situation of a person I know who wrote a film, and I saw the film was coming out in theaters, and I reached out to them and said, "Oh, you wrote this? That's awesome! Like, great! You know, like I hadn't talked to this person in a couple of years. We were friends, going back several years, and I reached out and I just said, "Oh, that's awesome! Like, how you been? Like, this is so cool." And they reached back out to me and said, "Oh, thank you, but just to be honest, like my name's on it, but there's a lot that changed between when I submitted it and what's actually on film. The director changed a lot, the studio changed a lot. So yes, I am credited as the screenwriter and the only screenwriter, but I promise you, this is not the story I originally told." And I was like, "Oh, that sucks." And I mentioned, to you, Patrick, off air. I said we're not going to review it either way because I have a personal relationship with this person and just wouldn't be right. And so we never touched that film. So I do understand the difficulty. The other side, the reason why I say I disagree with it slightly is because to give critical analysis of film or books or any kind of creative endeavor, you can acknowledge that it's a hard freaking job and it's not easy to do what you do. And then you can also still be critical and say that the story was weak, the acting was bad, the directing wasn't great. So I mean, there's layers to it, and I guess what I'm
Oh,
getting
I'm
at
just
here,
talking about the getting angry part.
yeah, we're
Like
not.
that's the waste of time.
We were talking about this off air, and I said, clearly, I mean, listen, I'm being honest, I didn't like this film. But I didn't like this film. I think a lot of people didn't like this film because of the 1994 original. And I understand there's a hardcore passion for that movie because I am a hardcore passionate fan for the 1994 Crow. But I think what you have to understand is it's not sacrilege to remake it or redo it or do another one because, as I said earlier, it's already been done. Get angry about the ones that came out 3 years after Brandon Lee died. There's plenty of those. I don't see people up in arms and losing their minds about those. All I'm saying is don't judge it like that. My criticism of The Crow, 2024 Rupert Sanders, The Crow, is about this film. It has absolutely nothing to do with the 1994 film, absolutely nothing to do with Alex Proyas, absolutely nothing to do with the tragedy of Brandon Lee. That is all out of my mind. And to this film's credit, here's my one maybe compliment to this movie, Patrick, is that if you watch this movie, the very basic premise and the names are the same. Eric Draven, Shelley Webster, and it's a story of revenge. And again, that's not spoiling anything. If you even halfway know what The Crow is, you know what that is. This is so unlike the 1994 film that if you get mad about that aspect, like, I can't believe they touched this, then you're just getting mad because you just love that film and you don't want to give anything else a chance. Because this could be
Right.
This could be Quentin Tarantino's The Crow. Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, two incredible directors, and they could have a script by the guy who's won 9 Oscars and do a film with, like, Brad Pitt, like every Oscar. It could be the most Oscar-worthy film ever. And it could be an absolute it could be the film of the year. And there's going to be Crow fans who say it's sacrilege because you're remaking The Crow. My point is, don't do that because it's just pointless. Because, again, even The Crow, the 1994 Crow, was a remake of a comic book. It was not original IP, original intellectual property. It was not original. Part 2 of that is, and even if it isn't, I understand the tragedy there, but just you have to judge this film on its own. And that's what I'm doing tonight. When we talked off air, Patrick, I said, like, I don't want to be unnecessarily cruel to this film just for the sake of cruelty because there's not much I'm going to compliment about this movie. But that has nothing to do with the past. And it certainly has nothing to do with not understanding that a lot of things go into making a movie. And I don't know if the screenwriters, if their script was taken away from them. I don't know that Rupert Sanders didn't get a million notes from the studio. But where I disagree with you a little bit is because you do have your name on it, because you did put it out there, and because you're doing interviews about it, someone has to, like, end up as the lightning rod.
Oh, I said
And
that right off the top. If you put your name on, the reason you get
yeah,
to be directed by is because you get to take the blame. That literally is how the studio posits it. You want it to be
yeah.
directed by Rupert Sanders? Cool. If anything goes wrong, they have to talk to you. That's the tacit agreement when you become a director. That's already part of it. I'm just saying there's so many moving parts. Understand that when your anger, which you don't have, but I know a lot of fans do, when that anger comes out, I'm like, dude, it's misplaced. Trust me, Rupert Sanders wanted to make your favorite movie. He wanted to. He didn't succeed, for us at least. For some people, by the
Well,
way, I read some criticism. They did like it, but you and I did not.
yeah, and I'll be honest, the vast majority of people I've read have not liked this film, and there's a reason why it opened in, I think, fifth place on opening weekend, which is bad. That's not a good
Yeah.
sign. And this film kind of weirdly, like when the trailer first dropped, and everyone went nuts again, unabashedly nuts for no reason. They was supposed to come out in June. They pushed it back to August, and I was like, okay, maybe they're just letting everything kind of die down. And then when this was coming out, I had to tell you it was coming out. I was like, "Hey, The Crow's coming out on the 23rd." And you're like,
I was
"Really?"
like, oh shit.
Like it was just very quietly, like under the radar. So it's almost like, I heard rumors that there were early screenings and people walked out, and like at that point there was too late to change anything. It was already way past doing reshoots or anything. So they're like, "Well, this is what we got." And I think the feeling I get, Patrick, is they just kind of threw this in theaters knowing it wasn't going to do great. Because if you notice, I can't remember the last time I saw a trailer for this on TV. I know
Yeah.
I saw a bunch back in June when it first dropped. I saw it all over the place, or May, or whenever it first came out. I don't remember seeing a Crow trailer anywhere. I know I maybe saw one or two in the movies I saw, but I definitely didn't see any on TV. So I have to imagine the marketing budget for this thing was next to nothing, because they're kind of like, well, we kind of have an idea what's going to happen. And I think their worst fears were realized. Also, to your point about not getting angry, I agree. You shouldn't get angry. Although I will say, just from a personal level, fuck David Gordon Green. Um,
Damon, for the record, is still very angry about Hollywood
I'm not
Halloween ends. He has
actually.
not stopped.
I'm not angry about it anymore. I just find it funny because it's like it is literally the perfect. It is like the literally beating post for me. All these years later, I still have fun just kind of
I'm going to
just beating
broker
that movie down.
a peace agreement between the two of you. And we're going to
We're
film
gonna
it and everything.
it's gonna turn into like a street brawl. Like me and David Gordon Green are gonna run into each other one day. We're gonna lock eyes and we're just gonna run at each other and just start punching. It's great. But yeah, so like The Crow. So again, we're not going to get into spoilers here. We're going to get into some categories here in just a second. But here's the so the good and the bad with The Crow, non-spoiler version. The good, as I said, I know this sounds like a really backhanded compliment. They didn't try to remake the 1994 Crow. As weird as it sounds, that is a huge compliment, because that was everyone's biggest fear. Honestly, that was everyone's biggest fear, is you're going to somehow ruin what Brandon Lee made in 1984. Now, again, I disagree that you are doing that, even if you did, but they didn't. This is like a totally different, like, premise is the same, the names are the same. That's really about it. And that's not a spoiler. Like, again, like the premise, yes, the revenge story, one of them dies, yes, that's all true. But the actual movie feels nothing like the 1994 version of The Crow. The problem with The Crow, and there's a multitude, many layers to peel away like an onion, but it starts with story, it starts with chemistry, it starts with execution, it starts with, in my opinion, Patrick, a film that was made far more about style than substance. And that, to me, suffers. When you want to make your movie look cool, but you don't really have an underlying story or whatever, a plot to drive that.
You're looking for that substance,
that style.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like again. I know this sounds like a really terrible way to put this, but you know this because you've done it. You've done music videos and you've done commercials. When you're doing a music video or a commercial, it's a 2 to 3 or 5 minute short movie, right? And you're really just intersplicing images to go along with the music, or images to go along with whatever you're trying to sell. And you can make some pretty cool stuff. You watch a car commercial when they're whipping around a corner and they show the dirt splashing off the tire, or you watch a music video and you see there are actually go watch like the Stan video, the one with Devin Sawa that Eminem did back in the day. Like they actually tell a story in there of him scribbling and going along with the lyrics and little things like that. And then you see the end where Devin Sawa's driving the car and he's screaming the lyrics of Eminem, and they're telling a story and it's very visually impactful. But that all fits into a 2 to 5 minute version. It felt like Rupert Sanders wanted to make a music video of The Crow and forgot that he had 2 hours to fill. Because that's what this movie felt like to me. A lot of cool images, a lot of slow motion, some really cool like fight scenes, some cool graphics, music, weird, lighting and camera work with the characters, and a lot of that kind of stuff. And then, it just, the story went nowhere in 2 hours. And when it did try to go somewhere, it felt like it crashed into a brick wall.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about it, and we'll keep that for our spoiler section. We got a lot to do there. But Damon, I mean, we got to find a way to find an MVP, right? There's got to be a silver lining here somewhere.
Yeah, so this is our MVP, our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP award, named after great character actor Ken Foray from the movie From Beyond, when he jumped down a flight of stairs and into a basement wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. That, my friend, is an MVP performance. Now, for The Crow, you'll notice we did not have a best performance in here. That's for a reason. But we do have an MVP. So, Patrick, when it came to The Crow, who gets your MVP?
My MVP, Damon, and I'm not being a smartass because I do believe this. My MVP goes to the soundtrack. I identify as goth. I identify as a Hesher. I'm a kid who likes heavy shit. And this movie does not disappoint in that respect. A lot of the music moving throughout this movie, I was like, oh shit, I like that, or oh shit, I have that, or oh shit, what is that? Like it was one or the other or the other. And as a music geek, and I know you're a big one too, I looked at the soundtrack and it's got like Joy Division, The Bug, Traders, Lander, Gary Newman, The Veils, and Foles, and a couple others. All the music just sounds awesome. And it's funny, I was actually having like a late dinner with my goth friends, and I was the only geek that had seen it yet, and they were all just like, "What is it? Tell us." And I was like, "It's nothing like the old one, so don't worry about that part. But I will say this: the music is fucking great." And they were like, "Yeah, great." Like, some people are just going to dig on that. Some people are going to dig on that imagery you're talking about too. But for me, the MVP was the music, because let's face it, Damon, The Crow, whether it's the 90s one or this one, it's steeped in goth culture, and this is a good goth soundtrack.
What's funny about it, and it is a good soundtrack, let me be clear about that. What's funny about it is when they did the original trailer and they had that track, Take What You Want From Me, from Post Malone and Ozzy Osbourne, everyone's like, oh my God, what a song to choose. And Rupert Sanders did some interviews and he said, I wanted to kind of be given like an updated version of The Crow. And so I wanted to include a track that would, be a modern version, like the Post Malone version of the audience. And I said, like, I'm fine with that. I actually really like that track. I'm a big Ozzy fan, and I'm not a big Post Malone fan, but I really like that track.
That's a good song.
So I had no problem with it. But weirdly, the movie actually dips way more back into, like, Joy Division, which is not current, and things like that. Like, it kind of dips into, like, the old, like, goth. So it was kind of funny because what Rupert Sanders said for the trailer does not really carry through for the movie. Again, I think the soundtrack's awesome. I agree with you. It's just funny. Like, I was expecting like Machine Gun Kelly or something, I don't know, just something like, more modern, more,
right,
more like a younger audience, and it wasn't. So I don't know if something changed or if he's just like, that was always the intention, but yeah, I dug the soundtrack a lot. Now, my MVP, and people are going to laugh and say, boy, this is the most backhanded compliment you could give somebody. I'm saying this genuinely. Now, we're going to get into the details of why I dislike this film at great extent in spoilers. But again, for people who haven't had it spoiled yet and saying, I need to know why I don't need to go see this movie, I already said a multitude of reasons why. But my MVP goes to Zach Balin and William Schneider, who are the screenwriters of The Crow. Now you're thinking to yourself, Damon, how are you going to give them the MVP when you've already said this movie is more more style than substance, which means the story is not great? I'm here to tell you, the story's not great. It isn't. The script is a big part of the problem with this film, but here's why I'm giving them the MVP. And I genuinely mean this, Patrick. I'm not saying this like facetiously or like I'm trying to mock them. I said earlier, this film doesn't remake The Crow. The premise is the same, and yes, there is a moment when he has like the black eye makeup that you see in the trailer where he kind of looks like The Crow. Everything else about this movie is so wildly different other than the names of the characters and the premise. A lover gets killed and comes back to avenge the unjust death of his girlfriend. Okay, that premise is the same. Everything else about this film, the look, the feel, the dialogue, the characters, all different. Totally different. Like, it's not even remotely... Like, I went in totally expecting, and this is... I mean, I guess you could call this a spoiler. It's not really a spoiler because it doesn't happen. I thought at some point they would stick in a couple lines from the 94 Crow just to, like, here's some familiarity for you. So I was waiting for, like... It can't rain all the time, or victims aren't we all. I just knew it was coming because I was like, here, they're going to do it. They never did. So, and I genuinely mean this. I don't know if it was the studio, Rupert Sanders, or the screenwriters who went in saying, we cannot try to remake The Crow. Because The Crow, the 1994 Crow, is so beloved that remaking it would not be the right way to go. We need to make a similar story with the same characters and make it our own. For better or worse, and clearly we are not big fans of this movie, it didn't work. But it would work less if this did feel like they went and said, we're just going to try to remake, and it's just a bad version of the... Because it's like when Gus Van Sant remade Psycho, and he made a shot-for-shot remake of Psycho, and you're like, why? Like, you just remade it with Vince Vaughn and Anne Hesh. Like, just go watch the original, which is 1,000 times better. Like, why would you do that? I like Gus Van Sant, by the way.
Yeah, I do too.
But, like, some like, a great example of this, kind of in a good way, would be Dawn of the Dead. Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is one of my favorite horror films of all time. James Gunn wrote the script. The premise of a zombie attack and people surviving in a mall, yes, that's the same. But if you watch George Romero's film from 1976 and you watch Zack Snyder's film, they are so different you would never even know they're the same film. They have the same name, and they both take place in a mall and involve zombies. You would not even know they're the same film, ever. Imagine that as The Crow of 2024. Just, not the good version. But I give them credit because for what, better or worse, they made their own movie. Did I like it? Did it work for me? No. But thankfully, they didn't try to go down that route where they're like, we need to remake the 1990s. And they didn't do that. It just has the same name and the same characters.
And, like I said earlier, I go, you never know what got mixed up when. Like when Zach and William turned in the screenplay, or maybe Zach wrote a version and then William punched it up, or vice versa, or whatever. We don't know. But whatever version that they eventually turned in and eventually got worked on by the studio and Rupert, it feels very different to me. And we'll talk a little bit in spoilers about things that felt different, where I was like, cool, I'm glad you did that differently. Like, you're actually just showing me something different. I do respect that they were like, we're not just going to try to remake the 90s Crow. We're not going to do Brandon Lee's Crow. We're going to do something totally different. I respect that. Like, I want people to get out there and try their own thing and make it their own way. Did it land? No, but it could have landed. That could be for a myriad of reasons. But I do think that baked into the script is like, this is a different way to tell this story. I do think that's baked in. I do think when you give those guys their flowers and you're not being facetious and you're not being a dick, you're just saying, cool, you guys were just like, we have our way into this mythology. Here's our way in. And it's nothing. And it would have done this movie an even way bigger disservice if it was just trying to be the Brandon Lee Crow, if Top Dollar was the bad guy and they were dipping in lines and stuff to try and fit it into this new world that they were doing. They were smart to just go, nope, this is what we want. This is the way we want into this. And so, yeah, congrats to them for like being willing to do that when they probably got some big pressure from Lionsgate to be like, hey, write this to be a little more like that one. I guarantee you some executive at Lionsgate said that to them. And they were just like, between them and Rupert, they were like, no, we really want to speak it our own language. And they did.
Yeah, and like just like again, this isn't a spoiler because I mean you could look all over IMDb and know it's not there. Like Ernie Hudson doesn't show up as Officer Albrecht. Like they're not trying to say this is like a continuation or a sequel or a direct remake, and they're just having there's no Officer Albrecht, there's no T-Bird, there's no like they
No.
made their own Crow story. Now again, like I said, I'm being honest, didn't work for me, but I appreciate that they didn't go over the top and just say, hey, we got to stuff in reasons to make you feel like you're watching a remake of the 19. So I almost hesitate to call it a remake. It's a reboot or a reimagining, or I don't even know what you really call it.
Well, I think remake is the right way to say it, where it's like we remade it into something else.
Yeah.
Like that's truly what a remake should be. It's like it should be the familiar idea but done differently, remade. They really did remake this.
Yeah, and so I'm legitimately saying, like, yes, it didn't work for me, but I appreciate that the screenwriters didn't try to just stuff in little references or characters or whatever just to try to make it feel familiar, because there is a far worse version of this film that does that, and it just feels cheap and tawdry, and it feels like you were just trying to appease or I don't know, maybe piss off the fans from 1994 by saying, here's Officer Albrecht, here's T-Bird, here's Top Dollar. They didn't do that. And I know, by the way, another reason why I give him the MVP is as I was doing my research for this movie, there was many versions of this Crow movie throughout the years. As I mentioned, all the actors who were reportedly in line to play Eric Draven, that they were basically going to do that. There was a version where what is her name? Rice. What is her name? Ryson, the one from Mandy who got nominated for an Oscar.
Oh yes.
What's her name? Hold on, I gotta look at her name. It's gonna bug me if I don't think of this. What is her name? Let's see. Look at all the different names were in there. Let's see. Yeah, I know that was in there. And then who was it? God, it's gonna bug me here. Sorry. Oh, Andrea Riceborough. That's what it is. Andrea Riceborough. There was one point, and again, this is just a rumor, but there was a rumor she was in line to play a female Top Dollar in a Crow remake.
Sounds.
I think that would. But I'm saying like that would. I think that is where you're treading on that ground of like
yes.
like where you're like, okay, we know like Michael Wincott was so great in the original, and I understand like Top Dollar is a character in the original Crow comic, so is T-Bird. Like these are all in the original Crow comic. So technically, again, you're not really sacrilege by just remaking another comic book, but even that they didn't do. So I'm kind of like, yeah, like okay, it didn't work. I didn't love it. Lots of problems, but you didn't go that route and you could have. And so I actually literally, not joking, applaud them for just doing their own story, doing their own version. Again, didn't work for me. Maybe it worked for a lot of other people, but for me, it just didn't work. But I think I would have bumped up against a lot more if you just gave me like the cheap version where like, oh yeah, here's Officer Albrecht. Here's, it can't rain all the time. You're stuffing in the dialogue. It's just, that just feels cheap. So yeah, again, legitimately, MVP. Patrick, before we get to spoilers, the last category we get to spoilers in our new categories is, does it have our money? I feel like I know the answer to this question before I ask it. They already got my money, so I'm trying to tell our audience whether or not they're going to get it again. Did they have our money for The Crow, Patrick?
I mean, yeah, as you said very aptly, yes, they already got our money. I would have been very happy to watch this on Shudder or watch this at home. I'm sure it's probably going to be on Prime or Max or something, wherever it's going to go. I could have waited for streaming. Hey, go to the movies. Tell me I'm wrong. But after what I saw, I go, yeah, I could have waited for this.
I think the point of this category is like spending money, telling our audience whether we would spend our money on this. And I'll tell you right now, like I'm not gonna go back and say like I did spend my money, so no, I don't want to do that. The question is, does it get our money? And the answer for me is no, it doesn't. And I'll say this very honestly, Patrick, I have no reason to ever revisit this. It's not because I'm pissed off because they did it. Not at all. And I'll say this now, this will piss off people. I actually encourage them to do it again. I hope somebody does this again in the future
Oh
and
yes.
does a
Oh
better
yes.
version, because there is a great version of this movie that can be done. This just didn't work. But is it going to get my money? No. I have no reason to ever see this again. And I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm just like, there's some movies I see, and I'm like, yeah, I saw that, and I don't need to see it again. So if it
I
pops
think
up
Lord
on,
of the Rings is great. I don't ever plan to watch it again. And I like that movie. I was just
yeah,
like,
like
cool. I'll never watch that again, but cool.
if this pops up on HBO or Showtime or Stars or whatever, I'll turn the channel. It's just not for me. Um, so no, it doesn't get my money. But like I said, I'm not saying that another version couldn't, because if they do this again in 10 years, will I be first in line to watch it? Yeah. And do I hope it's awesome? Absolutely. So no, it doesn't get my money, but maybe a future one will. With that being said, Patrick, we're going to now get into We're now going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen The Crow, and judging by the box office returns, many of you haven't, we're not going to talk spoilers, full spoilers. Now, again, the premise is the same. So, like, the details are different. So even though, yes, we are getting the spoilers, I'll be
We're
honest,
not really
Patrick,
spoiling anything.
I mean, outside of a couple little minor details, we're not really, because the beats are, I mean, a story of revenge. Well, what are you doing? You're getting revenge. Okay, well, that's not that. It's it's not like laced with like a lot of mystery there. So the spoiled plot of this movie and how it again, I'm just saying it differs wildly from the original. When we get into this story, we meet Eric and Shelley. Eric Draven is a troubled kid who kind of grew up troubled, and he's had problems with drug addiction and all these other issues. And then we meet Shelley Webster, who is a young concert pianist who kind of fell in bad and just kind of fell out of favor with her crowd, and she got involved in drugs, and then we realized that Shelley's got something in her past that's kind of coming back to haunt her. Some person from her past she has evidence on that will get him into trouble, and so people are coming to get her and her friends who are involved in making this video that could incriminate this guy. And so she's kind of on the run. She gets busted by the cops with a bunch of drug paraphernalia on her. So she ends up in drug rehab. And that's where our star-crossed lovers, Eric and Shelley, meet for the first time. They fall in love, and they end up escaping the rehab together to avoid the people who come looking for Shelley once again. Eric and Shelley have this whirlwind romance. They're all in love. They're talking about marriage. They've known each other for 3 days, but it's like the greatest thing they've ever experienced. They have sex in bathtubs and all kinds of craziness. But then, of course, Shelley's past comes back to haunt them. The bad guys show up, kill Eric and Shelley. Eric falls into this weird nether region where he meets a guy named Kronos, who is like the keeper of the purgatory, for lack of a better word. And he says, because your deaths were so unjust, we're going to give you the chance to go back and save and avenge your death, and you can actually bring Shelley and yourself back to life if you do this right. And he's like, really? He's like, yeah, go back. And so Eric Draven goes back to Earth to avenge the death of himself and Shelley from this unjust crime that took place. And the villain is a guy played by the great Danny Houston named Vincent Rogue. Is that get that name right? Vincent Rogue? Yeah, Vincent Rogue. Now, here's where the story just verges all the way to the right. Vincent Rogue is a weird supernatural ageless creature who feeds on the souls of the innocent to keep himself living for immortality. He's like a vampire but doesn't suck blood. And what he does is he can speak words into a person's ear, and he can either make them kill or even make them kill themselves. And when they do this, when they carry out this this atrocious act, his soul is replenished and he can live longer. Way different, not top dollar, and he's not really a crime boss. He's just this weird, like, immortal figure who can speak these words into your ear and make you do things you don't want to do. Almost like a hypnotist, but not supernatural, very supernatural, which threw me way off. Like, I understand we're dealing with a supernatural story here, Patrick. Again, you're talking about somebody coming back from the dead who is unkillable, but yeah, like, it was really odd. Like, that whole thing threw me off right away. Like, this is a supernatural, like, immortal creature? Okay, that's not something I saw coming. That's pretty much the premise. Did I get all that?
You did, yeah. And I we're going to get into why all this stuff doesn't work for us. We have a big list of of the whys. But Damon, I wouldn't mind talking about some of the things that did work for me first, if you don't mind. We can talk
Yeah.
face huggables. This is the new category. Face huggables are things that we do like about movies. I always try to find a silver lining best I can. This movie has a few things that I do like, believe it or not. One of them is the cinematography. It's fantastic. It is a really, really great looking movie, and I want to make sure that I give credit to Steve Annis, who is the cinematographer. You and I, Damon, we grew up, we were like, I would say, late teens, early 20s in the 2000s when it was like broody and dark and desaturated and lots of black and leather and stuff like that. You get a lot of that feel in this movie, and it's very largely due to the great cinematography. Great music, as we mentioned before. Everybody looks cool as shit. Let's be honest. Like, that's something from the original Crow that I do like, but it was a very 90s version. This is an updated version. I mean, I think if they were trying to attract young people to this movie, the young people in this movie feel now and relevant, and they look cool to the now and the here and now. And I was like, yeah, nobody felt out of place. At least the young people. The older people really felt out of place. We'll get there. And there was something I really liked, which was kind of weird. Eric Draven in this one, he has no skills. He's actually very timid. He's actually a very kind of scared, shy person. He can't really fight very well. He can't really fuck shit up. He's not an intimidating person at all. Like he's just kind of this kid he's covered in tattoos and stuff, but he's not a tough guy. He's not a badass. And I liked that at least his character had to kind of struggle through all that stuff. And then finally, and I wish they had actually exploited this more. They didn't use it quite enough. An element of this movie was almost an investigation movie because he didn't have these like great fighting skills where he would just like fuck shit up. He was trying to like figure things out. He was being a detective. He was kind of going on the hunt, looking for this one, looking for that one, finding the connection so he can hunt down the people that killed Shelley. They kind of abandoned that for what? I'm not sure, kind of for the cool imagery, which is what I talked about earlier. They sacrificed that aspect of the story for the cool imagery. And I think, yeah, ultimately, Damon, those are my face huggables. And I really wish they would have like stuck to the detective stuff because I think it was working.
Yeah, so I know my list is going to sound very minimal, and it's not, again, I'm not being unnecessarily cruel. I'm just being honest about what I actually liked about this movie. And I think you're right. The cinematography is good. I think the set design was great. They shot this in, I think, Budapest or the Czech Republic, and it doesn't look, and again, I understand that's not like the first time ever a city or a stage built there looks like it is in America. We always reference one of our favorite films from last year, Evil Dead Rise, and we love it, but they said it takes place in LA, and we're like, this doesn't look like LA. Like, we love the movie, but this looks like Detroit, not LA. I can't remember where they shot that at, but we were like, if we were going to get one criticism. Yeah, we were going to get one criticism. We're like, yeah, this doesn't look like LA. Like, you lived there. I've been there many times. Like, this doesn't look like LA. Again, that was just like almost like a sideways comment about that movie because most of it takes place indoors. But the look of this film is great. The scenery looks lived in, and this feels like a very grimy movie. I think that's one thing the original Crow got right so well is because they never said it was in Detroit. They said it's in, a town where Devil's Night takes place, blah, blah, blah. But it feels very grimy, very gritty city. And I think they got that part of this part, again, I'm not trying to compare it. I'm just saying, like, the grittiness, the griminess of this film feels very lived in. And I appreciate the set design, all that kind of stuff. As I said, honestly, the style of this movie's great. Like, the style looks great. Now, I will say, to your everyman point with Eric Draven, with Bill Skarsgård, I bump up against that only slightly because they will do anything in their power in this film to get the shirt off Bill Skarsgård so you can see how ripped and muscled up he is. Boy, do they want to show that guy's six-pack in this movie. Now, I'm not saying just having a six-pack makes you intimidating, but boy, do they want to make him flex in this movie. But the look is great, and like I said, the look of the film is great, and the scenery is great, and the cinematography is outstanding. And I think, as I said, my biggest problem, my overall overarching problem with this film is it's more about style than substance. The style's great. I just got nothing to grab onto with the substance of this movie, with the story of this movie. So yeah, it looks incredible, and I'm not a big Rupert Sanders guy. I've seen other stuff he's done. I'm not saying he's a bad director by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying I've not seen anything where I'm like, oh man, This is my
I,
guy. I can't wait to see what he does next. But
I liked Snow White and the Huntsman. I liked.
yeah, it was all right. But my point is like, again, this looks fine. You know, direction wise, it's fine. It's just
Right.
again more style than substance. But the style, good job.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
with with that being said, Patrick, our next category is our It's Giving Part 5. And would you like to explain the nature of this category as we get into this one?
I realized that if we were going to do pluses and minuses, well, we had to have a great reference to like the old horror days. And part fives of your favorite franchises almost always have a problem with them. Dream Child being one of them, and another one being Friday the 13th, part five, Jason Lives or something. What was it called?
Is that New Chapter? Is that the new one?
New
Is that
Chapter or something. Either way, these are movies that I would personally rather forget. These are all the little elements that are giving part five, and for me, the big one is this two hander, which is first and foremost, there is no chemistry between Eric and Shelley, and perhaps Damon, that is generational. Perhaps I just look at them and they are portrayed as young. I would say they're kind of portrayed as Gen Zers, even though I think they're both millennials, if I'm not mistaken, age wise. But they're kind of portrayed younger than that. So if this relationship was like a fiery, passionate, intense kind of romance that needed to be avenged from beyond the grave, I didn't feel it. And part of the reason why I think I didn't feel it was my second part to this. They decided to do an origin story of their love. And I remember back when we were talking about The Crow back in May, I said, you know what they could improve on The Crow is they could improve on this relationship between Eric and Shelley. They could do that. I think she kind of plays the background in the original Crow. Well, I wouldn't have done an origin story of their love story. I would have established them in love, or at least already established as a couple, because what you have to do in this movie is you have to see them meet, you have to see them kind of fall for each other a little bit, and then right when they're kind of like into each other and they do this basically just a montage of them partying and fucking and like having fun, then it jumps to them being killed. And now you've only had this much time, this tiny little amount of time to establish how into each other they are. And now he's going to have to climb his way out of purgatory and go fight for her soul. Just on screen, just the way it lays itself out, you go, I don't buy that they're this crazy about each other yet. They try to do it with some dialogue. They try to do it with some almost poetic, sort of intensely melodramatic, romantic language, almost poetic, really. It feels kind of out of place, but that's how they try to play it. And unfortunately, I think they wasted a lot of time creating their relationship when they could have just started with it and got me into why I need these two lovers to be together forever. They didn't spend enough time making me invested in that. Those are my big ones. That lends itself to my other giving part fives, which is the plot is all over the place. And a lot of times it's all over the no place. Like nothing is happening. Um, do the bad guys have motivation? I don't know. And I wrote this in my notes, Damon. I'm not kidding. Rogue, played by the great Danny Houston, who you and I dig, he just has a great presence to him. I go, what exactly is his motivation outside of just like living, like wanting to live forever? The best I could see is that he wants to help piano players' careers. Like that I'm not kidding. I'm not being a shithead when I say that. I'm like, okay, other than he wants to live forever, I get it. All he seems to care about is piano players. Shelley's mom was a piano player. There are two other piano players. Shelley herself was a piano player, and then there's another piano player that he fancies. He likes the piano. He likes the opera. That's other than just enjoying the arts. He's like like some sort of soul succubus, and that's how he likes to spend his time. And I was just like, okay, I guess. And that leads to my final giving part five, which is there's no interesting paint on the bad guys at all. They are very lifeless villains. He has a crew. It's not like any other crew I've seen because you don't know their names. You don't know what they want. You don't know what they're up to. And even if you don't, even if you don't have an establishment for those characters, there's nothing on them that excites you. There's nothing on them that feels dangerous. There's nothing on them that makes you go, ooh, that guy, or ooh, that woman. There's a woman that has like this crazy death, and I'm like, I barely saw her. She picked up a cell phone a few times. She rode in the back of a car a couple of times. That's it. Like that was really it. So even, and the 90s and certainly the 80s and many part 5s do a terrible job of establishing characters. I'm not picking on The Crow. It's just like but those movies, all those goofy movies that were not establishing characters very well, they put spikes on their head. They gave them leather jackets, or they gave them a cool gun or some cool knives or some. They gave you something. They wear plain business suits. I mean, the plainest business suits. At the end of this movie, Eric runs a gauntlet and kills, like, I don't know, maybe 15 security guards. They're all wearing black suits with a tie. No, nothing about the villains in this movie is painted to excite you. So you just don't have any investment. And if you don't have character investment, cool. Then give me visual investment. And they didn't even have that.
All right, so let me hit the rewind button here and start going back to point one by point one because a lot of these we share. Let me start with the chemistry. I, as a youngster, Patrick, you don't know this about me. As a very young man, I was really, really into science. And when I got to high school, I basically had to decide if I was going to stay in science or I was going to go in the arts. I ended up going in the arts and went to college for English literature. But there was a point when my physics teacher was like, you should go into physics. You should really consider going into physics. I think you would be really talented at that. And chemistry, and I loved it. So I understand science. That preamble is to say that I understand chemistry, and Bill Skarsgård and FKA Twigs had none of it. This is oil and water. It was like brother and sister acting like they're romantic, like that kind of weird, like, why are we doing this, like, vibe. I'm a Bill Skarsgård fan. I really like a lot of the stuff I've seen him in. It and some of the other things I've seen him in. He's great. He's a great actor, but he was just. It was almost like he was just hitting to, like, okay, I got to do this button. Like, I got to do this button, and it was just like going through the motions. And then listen, I'm not super familiar with FKA Twigs. I know she's a musician and now an actor, and trust me, there have been plenty of musicians who have transitioned into acting and done it very well. I think Jared Leto, who is an actor, went into music, but people have done it. We've seen it done. Dr. Dre's dabbled in acting, and other people have dabbled in acting, and it can work. It can work. I'm here to tell you this didn't work for FKA Twigs. We don't do our least favorite performance or anything like that because we kind of found it to be just kind of mean spirited. I'm just being honest here, Patrick. Like, if I was her, I would stick to a music career because this did not make me feel like, man, I can't wait to see what she does next. That was the weak point of the movie because I felt no connection between them. And I think a large part of that was just her acting just didn't do it. She didn't know how to, like, pull that out of Bill Skarsgård as, like, we are in love. Now, to your point, a huge part of this, and I would say this is like 90% of it, is giving us the origin story of them falling in love in a rehab facility, which is a really odd choice to have them get together. And they didn't really get together, like, they just like bumped into each other and then they just kind of like were attracted. They're more, this was so surface level of like,
Yeah.
oh, you're hot with tattoos. Oh, you're hot and kind of alternative. Maybe we should get together and fuck. That's literally how surface level this is. This is not like they had this huge connection. Now they try desperately to form that once they get them out of the rehab facility and they're living in random apartments and they're writing music together. I don't know the timeline, but it feels like they had to be together for like 9 days, 10 days. Because like the people that were hunting for Shelley were already hunting for her in the rehab. So it's not like they stopped for 6 months to look for them. Like this is a whirlwind romance. A, they didn't feel that close. And B, they were together for like 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks, and then the tragedy befalls them. So I think that was the worst idea possible. You mentioned the original Crow. Like, yes, like it would have been nice to see a little bit more lived in, so you kind of care a little bit more about Shelley. But even in those moments in that film, I know we're not, again, I'm not comparing, I'm just saying, like, even in that film that didn't give us a lot, that moment where you see her go up to the attic and he has the ring there for her, proposing to her, you just know, like, they feel like they've been there together. They've been in love. I there was so little chemistry between these two. I'm like, I think they're attracted to each other, but I don't really know that they like each other that much. Like, it's just a really odd. So that's part one. The origin story was a bad idea. I think they should have started the film not to do a rewrite of Living Dead, but I think they should have started the film with them already together and just build into
Yeah.
furthering that relationship. You know what I mean? Like they were already together, and now we're just seeing the end result of what happens when Shelley's past comes back to haunt her. And actually, when I saw the trailers and I heard Rupert Sanders talk about it, I thought that's the route they were going. He's like, we're going to give you more backstory on Shelley and Eric. I was like, okay, cool. I'm cool with that.
Right.
I'm done with that. It was like literally an origin story, and it was just too much because it just happened over such a short period of time. So yes, you were absolutely right. Too short. They were barely together, and is this guy going to be that driven to avenge his girlfriend that he's had for 9 days? I mean, I guess anyone can fall that passionately mad over, head over heels in love, but you are talking about movie love. You're not talking about real life. Like, movies are supposed to, give us a version of real life. Like, we understand it's going to be, a little over dramatic and things like that, but because the chemistry was so low, I was like 9 days together. Like, I'm not saying you wouldn't be upset they killed your girlfriend, but I'm like, yeah, all right, like this is just didn't have that fiery passion.
It really is about how the timeline is laid out, which, by the way, the timeline feels inconsistent anyway. Like, I think that's another problem with the movie. It's just how like, you can't really tell, like, how long things are happening. But you're right. There's no way their relationship is any older than 9 days. It really can't. Like, it really can't. So it really fucks with that. It really fucks with the idea that, like, oh, so now I'm dead. Like, oh, I gotta fight for her. I have to. Now what they tried to do was say, like, no one has ever loved me. They had this one particular bit of dialogue where he's like, I've never had anyone love me ever. There's one thing that loved me, which is the horse. And I know that comes with the bigger lore. And he, like, the opening shot of the movie is like he lost this horse. This horse died that he loved when he was a kid. And I was like, oh, are we doing the fucking Artax, like, Atreyu thing right now? Like, it very, very image wise, I guarantee you that was the reference. But, like, I guess the idea was like, wow, she loves me, so now I'll give everything over to her. I get that. Like, I know what you're trying to do. I'm just saying it didn't show up on screen, because really it wasn't them like just melting into each other's arms. It was them fucking partying, snorting, smoking, dancing, making music. Like, they're just being a couple 20 somethings, like going, this is the best 10 days of my fucking life, bro. Like, but it's kind of a bro relationship. Like, when you're looking at it, they're just like, bro, you hot? Yeah, bro, you hot? Yeah, you want fuck, bro? Yeah, bro, let's fuck. Like, it had that vibe, not the vibe of, like, you are my undying soulmate. Like, like, you have filled my soul with something so special that I will fight from here through eternity for you. That just isn't on screen. It's not there anywhere. Like, they tried, they didn't shoot those scenes, the scenes that show that. They did a lot of dialogue that did not convey that.
When I was younger, I met girls like in and out of college. Like, I would meet them at a concert or meet them at an event or something, and we would just be like lock eyes, and we were like, we are into each other, and we talk, and man, it just felt like we talked for hours on the phone for the first couple of days, and it's like, this is everything I've ever wanted in another person. But then you spend a couple of months together and you realize, wow, we don't really have as much in common as I thought. We kind of argue about dumb stuff. We don't get along as well as we thought, and we just kind of move on. That's relationships. That's how it works. I've had a lot of those, like, really intense beginnings, and then a lot of those flame out in the end. Like, I've been with my current girlfriend for 12 years, going on 13 years. This is my last relationship. I know that. You're married. You're not going to have another relationship, but it takes time to build that. Like, even, I know, like, you and your wife been together forever. You didn't know that 6 months in. Like, you knew that you loved her, maybe, but you didn't know. Like, you take time. They had none of that in this film. So it was very much like we joked about with having like the one night stand or whatever. Like, it felt like an extended one night stand. Like, man, we had really good chemistry, and even though they have no chemistry in this movie, but I'm saying, like, oh man, we were both hot for each other, and we got together, we boned, and we both like music and tattoos and cool. Trust me, I've had lots of dates like that. And then, a couple months down the line, I'm like, yeah, we really don't, no, this just isn't, no, this is, yeah, we're kind of hot for each other, but Yeah, this isn't enough. There's not enough there. So yeah, I agree with you there. And so yeah, that's a huge part of the problem. Now, let me talk real quick. So I understand that at the premise, The Soul of the Crow, this is a supernatural movie because a guy dies and a crow's spirit brings him back to life to avenge his death and the death of his lover. I understand at the core, The Crow, even the original comic book by James O'Barr, is a supernatural story. But they leaned really hard into that with this film. Not only from Eric falling into purgatory and meeting this guy named Kronos, who tells him about his mission to go back, and he's saying you can save Shelley and bring her back to life, and you can be with her again. So it's not even like they're not even. To be fair, like honestly, Patrick, I think that's probably one of my biggest problems with this film is he's not even really avenging their deaths. He's saying avenge your deaths and you both get to come back to life. That's the reward. The reward should be like, I'm just avenging our deaths. Like, I'm going to wipe out these bastards who killed us. We don't get to live, you don't get to live. Fuck all y'all. This movie literally gives him a reward. If you kill everybody and avenge your deaths, you get to be with her again. And I'm like, that's not the same thing. Like, I understand in the original Crow, he kills everyone at the end, Shelley comes back for him, and they go into the afterlife. But this is literally set up as like a reward system. He literally is like, if you kill all these people, you avenge your death, you will bring her back and you will be together because she's now in hell, rotting in hell, and you'll bring her back and you can be together. It was just a weird way to put it. Like, it should have just, like, that's literally the way he posed it to him. He's like, if you do this, you'll bring her back. So it was like a reward system.
Well, yeah, I mean, and also it was like I'd be like, "Yo, bro, I only knew her like a couple weeks. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm good. If this is where I gotta live, that's fine." But I think what I thought, and this I actually didn't pick up on what you're just mentioning, which is the idea of like coming back to life. But then what they do is they create a wrinkle, right? Like, so he goes back, he tries that, and it fails miserably, and he ends up back in purgatory. And the guy's like, "You're not being true. You're not being true about your love. Like, so it ain't gonna work. So sorry. I guess you failed. I guess you fucked up." And it's again very like they're just talking about it. It's very unceremonious, so it doesn't land. But he's just like, "Yeah, I guess it ain't gonna work because you're full of shit." He could tell there was no chemistry there, so he was just like, "Yeah, this ain't working." So what Eric does is he says, "Fine, I'll trade my life to save her, my soul to save hers. I'll put my soul in hell to get hers out." Because I think it is kind of, they try to set up a ticking clock that she is being sucked into hell and he can't reach her. So the only way to do this is to trade a soul for a soul to make things right. And actually, I guess the plot of the movie is destroy Rogue, because Rogue is he's an unholy thing. He should not exist. He is taking innocent souls and trading them for his immortality. So get rid of him, and the deal is done. Okay, like got it. Okay, got it. But at the end of the day, he goes, "I will trade my soul for hers. So this is what's on the line now. I will stay in hell for eternity, and she can live, or we can just save her soul. I don't know what. Like, they don't make it clear. And I'll go kill Rogue. Cool. If I thought that they had that kind of relationship, it's just nowhere on screen. It doesn't work. And I don't know if you wanted to. It kind of rolls into the ending, so I don't know if you wanted to talk about the ending a little bit.
Let me, real quick, just before we get there, let me just agree with you on the villain. The villain was so bad. And, one thing we talked about with great villains, you got to give them either character or motivation, one of the two. We actually said, like, Top Dollar is not the most, like, it's not the most fleshed out villain. We know ultimately he's just a power hungry guy. But the character was so delicious and so deliciously evil that we just loved it. Michael Wincott's performance was so great and over the top. We adored it. We talked about Hans Gruber in Die Hard. He was a great, deliciously evil villain, but ultimately he was after money. That was the big plot twist with him. He wasn't there to like take over a building and free the other terrorists from around the world. He was just trying to score in on a payday. Those villains, like I said, you got to give us a character or a motivation, or hopefully both. Like, that's better if it's both, like a Hans Gruber. as you said, I have no fucking idea what Rogue was after outside of his immortality. He liked piano, and he liked young girls who played piano, I guess. And he had to convince them to kill people or kill themselves so he could live. The whole thing was messy. And then when he's getting revenge on people, it's like, okay, the flimsiest of flimsiest plot devices here is that a friend of Shelley's sent her a video that shows him telling Shelley to kill a girl. That's the video that she has in her possession of her, is showing Shelley killing a woman in a room where like they're all partying together, and Rogue goes over and whispers some magical incantation into her ear, and she goes over and stabs this girl. Now, I'm not a cop. I got friends who are cops. I've worked around it. I've worked in psychology before. I think I have a decent understanding of how police work happens. Some guy whispering in your ear doesn't necessarily absolve you of the crime, and it doesn't necessarily imply that he did it. He didn't swing the knife. You don't hear him say, "Hey, go kill her, I'll kill your family." There was no threat there. You just see him whisper in her ear. Now, again, if I'm a police officer or a detective, I'd look at that and say, "Yeah, great. He whispered something to you. Why'd you kill her?" I'd be after Shelley. I wouldn't give a fuck about this guy whispering in her ear because we never hear what he says. We don't know anything about it. But I guess his existence being on film is what he's concerned about. Okay, whatever.
Right.
But that is the plot device. It's all after this video that shows him not really doing anything. But that's what this whole thing is driven upon. A video of them in a room together that shows Shelley killing a guy.
A video of her killing somebody, not a video of him doing anything.
The whole premise of the villain, the whole reason this villain goes all across the entire city to kill these people is because of this video. It is the flimsiest device of a reason ever. If you're going to boil it down that much, again, I promise you I'm not trying to do a rewrite. If you're going to boil it down that much, just say she was a witness to a crime. Why overcomplicate it by saying she killed somebody and he whispered in her? It's just really convoluted and overly complicated when it doesn't need to be. Just have her be a witness to a crime, and she's going to testify.
That's one way, or the other way is have the video show him suck the soul out of somebody.
Yeah, or
him doing something. It's her doing something in the video.
And by the way, the whole he takes the souls. We never see that, so we don't know. Like we don't see like some mystical form enter his body. We just see him like get recharged like a battery, like he's plugged in or something. It's just really odd. That's the device they use. Like the whole driving point of this.
You know, it'd be cool. Like, okay, look, I'm doing Rewrite the Living Dead. I swore this off, but we do it anyway. You know, it'd be cool is if like he does that and the soul turns into dust and he snorts the dust. And I believe me, that's a hacky first draft like spitball idea. But it's like make him somehow like, you know, like complicit. Otherwise, like that video proves he did nothing.
Or I know this is really graphic and you're on gore or whatever, but like I know this like it's not the soul, but I guess it's the soul. Like just have him go over and literally rip the heart out of the person and eat it. I know that's like super graphic, but like if a guy goes over, he didn't actually kill the person, but he goes over and literally snatches their heart out of their chest and starts munching on it, that's pretty fucked up. The cops are going to investigate you. This does nothing, and it's just like that's the device. Like this is what this guy is going through. Fucking, you know, he's killing people and just slaughtering people across the city to get this video. It's just a really flimsy device. So now let's get to the ending. Sorry, I had to go on my little diatribe.
It's a good rant, though.
They're so bad. The ending of this film is basically after you mentioned Eric gets pulled back to the netherworld because Kronos, the I don't know, his angel or whatever. Also, by the way, can I mention just to throw this out there, Patrick, the crow meant nothing in this movie. By the way, played no part in this movie whatsoever.
No.
Like
you just got to follow him. He doesn't.
Like he's just there. Like there's no moment where they're like, "Oh, the crow's got the power." Like you know in the original where the fucking Biling's character like shoots the crow, or whatever, and oh my god, no, crow serves no purpose. This could have been a fucking hummingbird. This movie could be called the Hummingbird, and that's the creature that brings you back from the dead. Anyways. The ending of this movie is basically after Eric goes back to the netherworld and he says, well, you didn't really love her because you doubted her because you saw her kill somebody. You doubted her, so I can't let you go, buddy. He's like, I'll sacrifice my soul for her. I've been with her for 9 days. She means more to me than anything. Send me back. I'll avenge the death, and you can have my soul descend to hell. He's like, all right, motherfucker, here you go. So he goes back up there. He lays waste to everybody. He runs into Rogue. Rogue doesn't even really do anything. He does the whispery thing in his ear, and then they both jump out a window. And then in the end, I'm just saying, like, in the end, he kills Rogue. He kills every one of his bad guys, his acolytes, which, by the way, there was a review. I think it was the Hollywood Reporter did a review, and they called his blonde-headed associate, who's like Rogue's lieutenant or whatever. They called her fake. They called her what was it? Oh god, they called her fake Tilda Swinton. It made me laugh because it's kind of what she does look like. They said fake Tilda Swinton. But anyways, he lays waste to all the bad guys, lays waste to Rogue, and then at the end, he gets pulled back down into the netherworld, and Kronos says, "Okay, you've done your job, so." You're going to hell, and Shelly's coming back without you, and he gives them like a moment together where they're able to like reconnect for a minute,
which he said they would not get, but he gave it to him anyway.
He gave it to him anyway. He's like, well, you did a good enough job. You fucked up enough people. We'll let you have it. So he gives them like a minute to come together, and then boom. And here's where it gets really, it gets stupid, Patrick. It does. Not only does she not, because they never make it clear. When they say you could be together again, they never say is it be together again in life or be together in the afterlife. They kind of hint both ways because they say she's in hell. If you avenge the losses, if you avenge your deaths, she'll come back and you can be reunited. But they never explicitly say reunited in life or reunited in the afterlife. But again, doesn't matter. The way it ends, Eric saves her, they get a moment together, and then boom, she pops up, and where we're at is at the beginning of about a third of the way through the movie, the EMTs, now played by Kronos, is bringing her back to life with oxygen after she was killed by Rogue, and Eric's dead beside her, but she's still alive. So, am I correct in thinking that Rogue is still alive in this other world? Because they still got killed, Eric still died, but Shelly's back alive in the real world again? Like, what the fuck?
So it erases her death, but do the bad guys stay dead?
That's what I'm saying. Like,
by the way,
they rewind time. They take her back to the moment when she died. So this is actually after Rogue's men killed them, but they're able to bring her back. So are all the bad guys back alive again? Like, it's just a really weird way of doing it.
And let's just say they're not. Let's say what it is like we brought us back to that moment where they didn't even fight for their lives. I want to be clear about that. Like Eric gets his ass kicked, and she's getting suffocated with a plastic bag, and then they suffocate him with a plastic bag. He puts up no fight. He can't fight for her because I established earlier that he doesn't have any skills. So he just gets his ass beat and watches them kill her. That's how that goes. It's tragic and it sucks, and you're like, oh, that's very unpleasant. But it's not like he fought for her in the real world at any point. He just died next to her, basically. And then like Kronos, as the EMT says, oh, he fought very hard to stay with you, or some like throwaway romantic line that was like, no, he didn't, because he wasn't here. He didn't fight for you here, and he fought for you in this weird other world, but only after it was so convoluted. But here's what got me, is that he made clear on that second attempt. Kronos says, you will fight for her, fine, trade your soul for hers in hell, great. But just so you know, when you come back here and you trade places with her, you're going to be in the kind of hell that is awful. Like, you won't be able to take it. It's eternal pain, suffering, and misery. Oh, wow, okay, big stakes, got you. Well, when he does all that, he doesn't go back, he doesn't go into hell, he doesn't fall into the depths of the darkness or anything. He just starts walking around purgatory. Is he the new Kronos? I don't know, whatever, but it's like none of the bad stuff happened to him. He just stayed dead and she stayed alive. Where in the timeline that exists, I have no idea. But I was like, that didn't happen at all. Did it not happen because he also killed the bad guys? But wasn't that the thing he was supposed to do? You see how like weirdly fucking convoluted all that is. It's just like, I don't understand what you were trying to do with any of that. And then in the end, he's not in hell, so did he sacrifice his soul? Like, I don't get it.
And then, like, the ending, the whole point of her coming back to life, that made no sense because that was never the point of the story. You're just avenging your deaths. Like, no one ever said you get to come back and hang around and, like, see your friends. How about Damon?
I'll stop you. How about the point of this story, The Crow, that they set up was to give her soul rest? And
Yeah.
they get rid of that idea too. The idea was like her soul's being sucked into the terrible depths of hell. You can bring it back here to purgatory. He never said he'd save her life. So it's like, well, what? Like
It was
they're not even going with their own logic.
it's like the what was the show Newhart or whatever, where like the ending, or there was some show like this
In the ending, he
where,
just
like,
woke up. Yeah.
he woke up and it was just a dream the entire time. And everyone's like, what the fuck? Like, you just ruined the whole point of the show. Like, it was just a dream the entire time. In this one, they literally roll back time because when she wakes up, it's right after she's been murdered. Like, I understand they're trying to get the dramatic shot of Eric laying there dead and the EMT saying he fought hard for you. But so now we're back in time. So now Rogue's alive again. Like, it's so utterly confusing. Like, all you had to do to fix that, and I'm not saying it would have fixed it. I'm just saying like it would have made it less like confusing. Have her wake up in a hospital bed weeks later, like she was in a coma, like the real Shelley was when he said she fought for her life for 36 hours, then she died. Have her fight for her life for a couple weeks in a coma. She wakes up, and that's how you find out. She wakes up, she's like, where's Eric? And like, he didn't make it, honey. And at least then you could imagine the dead guys are still dead. The bad guys are still dead. Also, we didn't even mention, by the way, I'm not trying to get off on a tangent here. We didn't even mention that this whole plot around Shelley revolves around her mother selling her soul to Rogue. Like, she wanted to be a famous model or something. And so like she made a deal with the devil of Rogue and saying, I'll give you my daughter to make me famous. And so she became a famous model or whatever. It was a weird, like, other side story in this whole thing that, like, Shelley's entire life was just set up to be a sacrifice for Rogue because of her mother. It was just weird. And yeah, the whole bringing her back to life thing really just ruins everything because the whole point of the whole story is to avenge an unjust death. She's not even fucking dead anymore.
I mean, that's them trying the new thing, which is like, okay, but the problem is they didn't set that up in their own movie. What they set up in their own movie was to save her soul from hell. Not to say that that's what they say in their own movie, Damon. I'm not trying to rewrite anything. They said, you want to save her soul from hell? Do this stuff and we'll bring her soul out of hell, but you'll have to replace her. Okay. Oh, never mind. We're not going to do any of that. What? Like, not okay. What? Then why did we spend 5 minutes talking about it? That's what's so fucking confusing.
You killed those guys good enough. We're going to give you a pass this time, Eric. So next time around, don't fuck around, all right?
But by the way,
we're going to give you
he had to have killed at least, I'm just ballpark here, 5 innocent security guards at the opera. Because there were clearly like Rogue's henchmen. Then there's got to be some other guys who were just hired for security going, whoa, there's a dude with a sword killing a bunch of people. I better go over there. And he like brutally murders those guys too. It's like, no. Like this is a mess. You guys have made a mess of this. Like, I don't know why there were so many things in this movie.
And also, like, one of the cool, and again, I know we said we're not comparing it. I'm just saying, like, one of the coolest parts about the original Crow in terms of, like, the Crow's killing when Eric Draven gets revenge, he kind of takes the guys who he's killing and kind of turns them against themselves. Like, with T-Bird, he straps T-Bird to his car, which is clearly that guy's, like, it's like his penis. That's like his favorite thing in the world. And he straps it to his car, lights the dynamite, and sends him off into the lake to die or the river to die. Right. With Tintin, he takes Tintin's knives. Tintin is a very skilled knivesman. He takes his knives and kills him with his knives. In this film, they just give him a fucking sword. Like, out of nowhere, he just finds a sword.
He finds a sword at the tattoo artist's house. But even though, to your point, so since the bad guys are so poorly developed, they die in very like I would say, unceremonious ways. There's no way to like kill the fake Tilda Swinton in any special way because you never developed her to be special. She doesn't have a special thing she does that makes a kill relevant there. It's just a cold kill.
And fake Tilda Swinton isn't even doing anything. She's just like standing around. She's not like the badass warrior. Or she's like
it's almost like he killed her and she was just like a secretary or not a secretary or like an executive or an advisor at his company. Like basically he just killed someone who didn't do anything.
I was kind of waiting for her to like turn into like Gogo Yubari from Kill Bill, the little girl who walks around with with Orinishi, and like then you find out she's actually like this badass like just huge killer, and she's actually the security guard by Orinishi. No, This blonde woman's just like hanging out. She's like the executive who apparently just like hangs out with Rogue and like carries out his orders, but she has no skill. She's not a warrior. It's just weird. Like, huh? And even Rogue, like I said, Rogue has no ability. He just whispers in his ear, they fall out a window, and he kills him. Like, there's no great battle. There's no, like, epic war.
Rogue is easier to kill than a Marvel main villain. Like, it was insane. But here's the thing: is like, okay, so let's just say someone goes, well, yeah, but we were just trying to make a gritty revenge movie. Okay, then make the bad guy so heinous that you want that revenge for him. Like the Charles Bronson movies, they'd like murder his family. There's reasons that guy has to go after them. Now, of course, the reason here, yes, FKA Twigs was unfairly killed. I get it. But the bad guys are like, they're almost faceless. They're almost non-existent. And Rogue is so like, who cares? Like, who he whispers in somebody's ear and they do all the bad work. He just sits there. So you just go, I don't even give a shit that he's getting bloody vengeance on all these people.
Yeah.
There's no painting of these characters to give you that satisfaction when they all get taken out, because they're just getting snuffed out, and you don't even care why they're getting snuffed out, because there was like the two guys who killed her and Eric. They're pretty much faceless. They tell me who those were. I don't even know who those people were.
I don't even know the names of any character in this movie besides Rogue. Like, I know he's the bad guy, and they say his name like 19 times, so we know he's the bad guy. That's it. Like, we don't know. They're all, like, again, goes back to my original argument why this movie just didn't work for me. It's all style and no substance. And when it comes to the villain, there's not even style with the villains. Like you said, they're all
not
just
style or substance. Yeah.
Like, they're wearing black. Like, again, like, I know. I'm just saying, like, even like we talk about, like, Top Dollar in the original Crow isn't the most fleshed out villain, but he's the long hair, the leather gloves, the sword, the voice, the great lines and dialogue. Like, he's just a deliciously evil villain. We said he's not the most fleshed out character in the world, but he's got that substance to him where you're just
you're drawn into
badass.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's fucking cool. This guy, he was wearing a black suit and a shirt, and like, he likes piano. What the fuck? Like, there's nothing to him, and it's a waste. And it's a waste because I said when we did our original Crow review and we talked about the sequel, I said, actually, one of the parts I'm most excited about is Danny Huston, because Danny Huston is a great actor. I love Danny Huston. And it's not that he's bad acting in this movie. He just has nothing to work with. They're just like, hey, you whisper in people's ears and steal their souls. Cool. What else do I do? Well, you really like young piano players, so I'm a pedophile? No. You just like
hearing them play.
Yeah, you just like going to
so
the
do I rip anybody's face off? Nope, none of that. What do I do? Yeah, I just want you to sit in the room while things happen.
And they also like there's a weird side story in this thing where we meet, like, Rogue finds another young pianist who he kind of adopts in a way, and she's in his car, goes nowhere, serves no purpose. Like, we're never explicitly told like he does horrible things to these girls. Like, I thought, I'm not trying to go down a dark path, but I thought, like, this guy's like a vile guy. Like, he's more into like the young women than the pianists. Like, he's like, he likes piano music and he's also attracted to younger women. They're just like his playthings. I thought that's where they were going to go. She's like in his car when this whole thing starts and nothing happens. Like, she's just there hanging out. I think weird.
I think the best way they try to describe it is like, all these piano players and the mom who was a model or whatever, like, they are my vessels for killing, but they never really like dig deep into any of it. They think they try to imply that there's no meat behind it. That's the thing. Is there's just that when I say there's no paint, I mean, it's like, if you look at a car or a house wall that has no paint on it, you go, gosh, if maybe a coat of paint would help that. That's what I'm saying with this movie. There's no coat of paint on it, on any of these characters. So it just feels flat. You're just like, oh, well, he doesn't even seem to care what the piano players are doing. So why should I?
Remember when you were a kid and you turned 16 and we were poor, so we kind of use this as like a relation to ourselves. We were poor, and when you got your first car, my first car was like a 1983 Buick LeSabre. It was a piece of shit boat. Giant white car with like a radio and a really bad tape player, no speakers, and it had 4 bald tires and barely ran. But I was 16 and I didn't give a shit because I finally had a driver's license and I had a car that was probably worth about $400, but I had a car. That's all I cared about. Now, as you get older in life, you get nicer things. My current car is a sport model of a car. I got fucking souped up everything. I got, I got the screen and I got the fucking Apple Play, and you get nicer things in life. You want a little bit better. I understand when you're a kid, you have to go with what you can. I was not complaining about that 83 Buick LeSabre when I was 16. I finally got a car, even though I knew it was a piece of shit. It was my piece of shit. This movie is the 1983 Buick LeSabre. It's a piece of shit. Like, it's not, there's nothing to it. It's a very stripped down car. Yes, it runs. Yes, it's a movie, but there's nothing else to it. And again, if you're paying money and you're going to see a movie, you want some substance. I'm not saying it needs to have 8 cylinders and rims and a giant stereo system. It doesn't need to have all that. Give me something, though. Give me more than my 1983 Buick LeSabre.
I mean, I was just going as far as, can I get some paint on this car? You know what I mean? Like if it's my Buick LeSabre, at least it's got a coat of paint on it. That's what I'm saying. This movie doesn't have that.
Yeah. Now there was some. Well, I'll leave this category to you, Patrick. There was some cool imagery, according to Patrick Gare, in this film. Patrick, what was the cool imagery you found in The Crow?
Yeah, this movie is, like we said, it's a lot of style over substance. But probably my favorite one of them was was Shelley getting dragged into hell. It's right after they die, they end up splashing down into this water. You shoot it the right way, and it just looks dramatic and cool. And she's sort of floating down, reaching out to him, and he's trying to swim to her, and he can't quite get to her. It's beautiful imagery. And it was kind of setting up something where I was like, cool, that's pretty dramatic. Okay, how is this motif going to continue on? It doesn't really. It kind of, they sort of lazily tie it back, and it doesn't work out that well. But that imagery was cool.
They do know how to shoot a slow motion falling into water scene, because they do that like 9 times this movie. When you fall into water in a Rupert Sanders movie, he's got you, baby. He's got you in a slow motion waterfall. Because that, I'm not saying it jokingly, like they get that right, but they do it a lot in this movie.
That's why cinematography was my face huggable, because I said the cinematography in this movie is gorgeous. I'm not pretending like it isn't. That was a particularly interesting piece of cinematography in this movie, and there's sort of shadowy figures kind of pulling her down. It was just well executed. I just wish it had mattered, and it didn't seem to matter.
Yeah, I would agree. Like I said, that's the look of the film is fine. Did you have any other cool images? Because I don't really have much here. I'm going to be honest.
There was one that, and I was there, of course, with Schwink, as I am at most of these movies. And there's the one where he's in the tunnel with the traffic. He gets kicked out of the car, and then he gets run over by another truck, and then he has to get up again. It was very Rabbit in Your Headlights. If you've ever listened to that song from Uncle with Tom York singing. And Schwink was even like, that's Rabbit in Your Headlights right there. Like, they're totally like homaging that. That was another one that I thought was particularly cool.
It's funny you say that, because after we both saw The Crow, I was actually talking to Schwink on Instagram for like an hour straight, going back and forth about what we didn't like about this movie. So I've already had this conversation with Schwink actually in private. We did. We went back and forth on Instagram for like an hour just talking about this movie. Like, oh my God. Yeah, like I said, again, and listen, if you want me to give you one thing with the imagery, I will say, and this is just an update to technology. Some of the flesh rebuilding moments where Eric gets shot or stabbed or whatever, and you see his bones kind of like that particular scene you're talking about where he gets run over by a car, his leg is broken. You literally see the bone kind of snap back into place, and it's pretty graphic. And I know we could talk about that for gore, but it's also pretty cool. Like, I'll say graphic wise, I know a lot of it's CG, it's not practical, and I understand why they did it, but it does look pretty cool. I will say it does look pretty cool. And
for a CG heavy movie, not bad. Like, the CG is not bad in this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. What about best gore, Patrick? They do get a little bloody in this movie. So did you have a best gore for The Crow?
If there's anything this movie has, it's blood and guts. And in this instance, it was blood and guts that I give it to. When Eric is realizing his potential when he first comes back, he realizes that he can heal. He doesn't know that. And again, as I established earlier, he can't fight for shit. So he's getting into a fight with one of these thugs from Rogue's team, and he gets a real bad gash in his stomach, a real bad one. to the point where they actually do the guts thing. Like the guts kind of start spilling out. It's not super graphic or super horrific, but you can start to see the guts coming out, and then he goes to push them back in and he just screams in pain because he can feel every bit of it. And I was like, I kind of like where they're going with this. It didn't go all the way, it didn't go hard enough, it didn't thematically work, but that particular moment where the knife goes in but the guts come out, I liked that.
Yeah, that was cool. Mine is a bit of a ripoff of another movie, but I did enjoy it, and it was actually kind of ruined a little bit in the trailer, but I did like the full version here. Was when he was in the battle with the people at the opera house. He pulls a move out of the John McClane handbook from Live Free or Die Hard, where the guy stabs him through his guts, and it looks like Eric's dead. Eric, they finally got Eric, and he literally takes a gun, sticks it through his middle section, and blows the guy away who's standing behind him. Again, totally stolen from Live Free or Die Hard. I have no problem with that because that's what movies do. But it was just so bloody to see him like literally stuff the gun into his guts, pull the trigger, and it blows the other guy away, and blood goes flying. So I thought that was a pretty cool gore scene.
Yeah, they got. I mean, if this movie has anything, it has a lot of blood and guts.
Yeah, it does do that. What about best kill, Patrick? There are a lot of deaths in this movie. You can't say that doesn't happen. So, what is your best kill in The Crow?
You know, for this movie, guns are usually the bad guy thing, and at one point, Eric does get a shotgun and he starts blowing people away. Excuse me, but then there is a guy who I believe was the guy who may have either I think maybe killed Shelley specifically or something. It was a guy he really wanted. I can't remember if it was him that he killed him or Shelley. I wasn't sure. But he takes that shotgun that he has, turns it around and just bludgeons the shit out of this guy with this shotgun. Something about it was very like primal and very just like I want to hurt you extra. Shotgun's too good for you. So let me hurt you extra by just beating you into mashed potatoes with this shotgun.
So, my best kill is actually like it's just a gruesome way to die. And I'll be honest, like we understand the atrocities that are carried out on Eric and Shelley in the original one. We don't need to repeat it here. We all know what it is. And I understand why that's like a horrific way to die and want revenge. But having a plastic bag put over your head and suffocated until you die seems right up there. Like I've always said, one of my least like that and like burning alive would be like two of my like most horrific because the way you're like clutching at your neck trying to breathe and you can't, and they actually if you want to actually I know this sounds horrible to say this is like one of the best shot scenes, but it is when you literally see them gasping for breath and the bag sucking into their mouths when they're breathing trying to get a breath and then they expire. It is pretty fucking horrific in this movie. They do a really good job. Now again, the build up, the story of how it all happens doesn't really make a lot of sense, but the actual brutality of their death is pretty fucking graphic. Have you ever seen a movie called The Life of David Gale?
I don't
It's
think
a
so.
it's a movie from like I want to say like the mid 2000s. It's got Kevin Spacey in it, but he actually plays like a more minor role. Kate Winslet's in it, Lori Linney's in it, and it's a movie about the death penalty. Like basically like wrong people get incriminated and put to death, and some of them are innocent. And so the entire premise of the story is built around this. They're doing an investigation into a guy who's about to be executed, and they're just trying to like get his story. And there's a scene where a character in that movie literally gets a bag put over their head and they die, and they have handcuffs behind them. And just watching them kick and like struggle, it's fucking horrific. It is fucking hard to watch. This kind of reminded me of that, where it's like, God, like that watching them suck for air and the bag going in their mouth. I was like, this looks like the worst way. Like, I don't want to compare notes of like the worst ways to die, but I can imagine that's not one way I want to try out.
And it is probably the most particularly brutal scene in the movie because he's looking at her while it's happening to him and it's happening to her at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's like not only is he suffocating and fighting for his life and sucking in this like losing all the air, he's watching it happen to her too. So I go, yeah, this is an intense scene. Like this makes sense. Like this is pretty heavy. It's just it falls empty. Unfortunately, like everything in this movie, it's like you start good and then it doesn't pay off, unfortunately. So yeah, great intense imagery, probably the most effective, I think most like Yeah, effective kill. You know, the one that really gets to you is that one.
Yeah. Next category, Patrick, remake, sequel, or leave it alone. And if you don't mind, I'll go first on this one because I think my
Please.
answer is going to probably be the most surprising because I am the hardcore Crow fan. I'm going to say it now, and I'm going to say remake, but not of this film, just of The Crow, because I want to be clear about this. I don't have a problem with you making another Crow movie. And my biggest compliment, as I said in the MVP section, is that they didn't try to remake The Crow. This one doesn't look anything like the original Crow. Outside of the premise, the character, yes, they are named Eric and Shelley, but that's literally it. And at one point, Eric puts kind of some makeup on his face and it looks really kind of weird. Doesn't really work. Didn't even need it, to be honest with you. But yeah, like that's it. Like they made a movie about a dead lover avenging his other lover, and a crow brings him back to life, and the crow doesn't even matter in this movie. But I am actually saying remake and give me a Crow movie that I would enjoy. I didn't enjoy this one, but if you give me a Crow movie that's actually well done, where again, this is a simple premise. It's a crow that brings back a lover, and again, maybe you don't use Eric and Shelley. Maybe that's just the way you just stop that mythology. You go on to a different couple or whatever. I'm all for it. So my weird answer is yes, give me a remake, but just give me a quality remake or reboot or whatever fucking word you want to use. Give me a reimagining of The Crow with the same story, the same premise, avenging lover, whatever. Just give me a coherent story. Give me characters I care about. Give me chemistry. And again, I'm all for it. So I don't know if we have to wait another 10 years, probably, because this film doesn't look like it's going to do very well. So we may be waiting 10 or 15 years for another one. But I have no problem if you give me another Crow movie. Just give me a good Crow movie.
Yeah, and I think my answer is basically the same, except I would say, you don't have to call it a remake. You could just keep sequelizing this. Basically it's like, oh, and by the way, this is what a lot of those sequels did of the original Crow. It wasn't Eric Draven, it was some other guy. The premise can keep existing. So you don't have to, you don't have to find a way to tell Eric and Shelley's story again. Tell a mother and a son's story, where a son is avenging his mom's death. That's fine. But that crow, the crow element still exists. You could keep going that way. This is actually a fun world to play in. I think this time around it just wasn't fun.
You could even, I know it sounds weird to say, you could even do best friends. Like people have intense friendships and
Yes.
friendships their entire lives. Like I have friends that I would fucking, like, you wrong my friend, you wrong Patrick, I'll come for your fucking throat. I'll tell you that right now. Like
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like you could have that kind of a movie where you go after a friend. Like there are it doesn't always just have to be star-crossed lovers. It could be something else and
Yeah.
make it. So yeah, like I'm saying, give me a remake. Just give me a better one. Just this wasn't it.
This
To
wasn't it.
that point, to that point, back to our last category, and I love this. Is it Crowy? Which I found hilarious because it's not a scary movie. Is it Crowy? So Patrick, is this movie Crowy?
I think it's crowy, right? Like it's raining all the time. People are dressed in black and they're a little bit skulky. They're a little bit emo. This is this is crowy. By the way, bloody is all get out. So if you have an aversion to blood, first of all, why you listen to us? Secondly, this movie gives you lots of blood, lots of blood and violence. More so than your standard revenge movie. It tries to be as bloody and graphic as it can be. So yeah, it is crowy in a very, very, very weird way. But I think I know what you would say, Damon, which is no, it's not because
There's no crow. There's no point in the crow. But also, like I know this is a joke that gets passed around a lot in circles, whether it's music or movies or TV. This feels like a Wish version of a Crow movie. Like, you go on wish.com and you're like, oh man, I found a really cool jacket, this leather jacket with spikes and chains. It looks awesome. And it gets to you. And it looks like it's vinyl and it's like an old members only jacket that they spray painted black or some shit. That's kind of what this movie feels like. Like they kind of tried to give me a Crow movie, but this isn't a Crow movie. Like they gave me the bones of what would have been a Crow movie, but they gave me no characters I cared about. They gave me no relationship I cared about. They gave me no villains I cared about. They gave me no story I cared about, and the story they did tell me didn't make sense. So no, it's not Crowy because I'm all for a Crow movie. I'm all for a Crow remake. I'm all for a Crow reboot. give me a story that actually makes coherent sense. And again, I'm not even like, I was joking earlier about the crow not mattering. I mean, it doesn't. It could have been a fucking hummingbird for all we really know. It could have been anything because they never make it a point in the movie. Just a crow randomly shows up on a building top somewhere. They're like, ooh, the crow. But yeah, just give me that. Give me some reason to grab onto the characters. Give me some reason to grab on the story. Yeah, but this one just isn't it. Like I said, this doesn't do it in any way, shape, or form. All style, no substance.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's unfortunate. All right. That is our exhausting review of The Crow. Hopefully we will have better films coming up soon. This just didn't work for us. And judging by the box office, by the time this episode drops, people are like, yeah, is it still in the movie theaters by now? I don't know. It may not be. Did not do well. And critically, doesn't seem like people are really enjoying this one either. So what's funny is real quick before we get out of here, I actually sat down in the theater. I always do you always pre-select your seats. And I'd pick seats like when tickets first go on sale because I want to make sure I can get good seats. And I was sat here and I hate when people do this, when it's like a totally empty theater. And I would say there was maybe like 20 people in this theater on Thursday night to see this. And I went to like the prime showing at like 9:00. I had my seat reserved weeks in advance. These like 4 teenagers, picked the seats like right next to me. And we were the only ones in the entire row, by the way. We were literally the only people in the whole row, and they selected to sit right next to me. I ended up moving down a couple seats. So at some points they started talking and whispering to each other, and I will do the thing, Patrick. I will get up and tell someone to shut the fuck up. I've done it before. Like, I've literally almost gotten into fights in movie theaters, like telling people to shut up. I don't like my movie going experience to be disrupted. And I'm not saying like general. I'm saying like I've had people literally talking on phones, and I'm literally going over like phone or yeah. But anyways, these kids were talking, and there was a moment in my head where I was like, I'm gonna have to say something because they keep giggling and like laughing, and they were getting kind of loud. But then the movie was so bad that their like commentary of like, what the fuck is going on? Why is he doing this? What is happening? Was making me laugh because I was like literally having my own thoughts. These were like maybe like 17-year-old kids, but like at some points it was like, what? And they were like laughing. It's like some of the really dumb parts. And I was like, yeah, this actually kind of improved my theater experience. So kudos to you. Kudos to you, 17-year-olds. I was about ready to yell at you, and you ended up actually making this a more enjoyable experience because I didn't have a whole lot to grab onto with the actual movie. Patrick, that is our episode for this week. Obviously, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes into the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and, of course, over on our YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on YouTube. We appreciate anyone who subscribes over there. Even if you don't watch every episode on there, just subscribe means the world to us and makes a big difference with us in terms of algorithm and search results and all that kind of stuff. And you can also, of course, find all the episodes over on our website, rewindofthelivingdead.com. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review. Tell us why you love The Crow. I'd actually love to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Like, if you love The Crow, tell me why you love The Crow. I'd love to hear it. Send us an email, rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's livingdead@gmail.com, or hit us up on social media. You can find us on Twitter /X, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead, and you'll find us over there. We post clips from the shows. We post news stories and all kinds of different stuff, but you can also send us messages, and we will absolutely try our best to get back to you, or just give us your suggestions. Or again, tell us why you loved The Crow. Tell us why you hated The Crow. We're happy to hear that as well. So hit us up anytime. We love that. You can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes into the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.
Caw, caw, bang, fuck, I'm dead.